Well, a warm welcome to today's talk. It's still Tuesday the 25th of January, although by the time I upload this it'll probably be Wednesday the 26th of January. Now, I want to talk about this new Omicron variant that people have been writing to me about in probably 1,000 or so of you. A lot of concern about this so-called BA.2 variant. Is there a new variant of Omicron? Yes. Am I concerned about it? No. But I'll give you the full details on that. So if you haven't got time to watch the whole podcast, that summarises it. But before we do that, I just very briefly want to look at South Africa's past as a guide to our present. Now, this is the data from South Africa from Dr. Rikwan Suliman. And I'll put the links to his site. Now, what we see here is we're imagining here all the waves started at the same time. And here we see the Omicron wave up very quickly, down very quickly, as opposed to the Delta wave, which went on for ages, as opposed to the Beta wave, which went down here, and as opposed to the first wave, the B.1 wave that went down there. So this just shows that the Omicron wave has been much quicker in South Africa, and we can expect it to be very similar here as well. And indeed in the States, although in the States it's still quite a bit behind. So that's the cases with the positivity there. Now, this is the waves of COVID-19 cases in Gauteng, which of course was the epicenter. So here we see the Omicron wave. Here we see this one here is the Delta wave. Here we see the black one is the first wave, the original wave, and the blue one, what we used to call this a South Africa variant, the Beta variant. That is that one. And of course the data here is not finished yet, but it is going down nicely. And judging by all the other waves, it's not going to start going back up again. Omicron is well and truly on the way to endemicity, to becoming endemic in South Africa. It won't go away entirely, but it's going to go down to remarkably low numbers, and I believe the same is going to happen in our countries as well. So, fairly encouraging. Now, this one, again, this is Gauteng, the epicenter area. Daily deaths. Now, first wave here, daily death rate. Beta wave, daily death rate. Delta, which we know was a bad one, death rate there. And here we see the death rate so far from Omicron. And we see the peak is so much massively lower. So at the equivalent time in the Delta wave, we were way up here and then way up here. But it's petered out much more quickly. Still people dying, I'm not minimising this, but way lower and definitely on a downward trajectory. The Omicron deaths in South Africa. So I thought that was really useful from Dr. Suliman there to just put these together. Now, this is data I've just taken from the South Africa live site just an hour ago. So this is bang up to date. This is what the wave looks like in terms of hospitalizations. So relatively low numbers of hospitalizations, peaking there at 9,643 was the peak. The different colours here are private and government hospitals in South Africa. This is the current situation now. So there's 6,200 people in hospital in South Africa now who have been diagnosed with SARS coronavirus 2, which we know is all Omicron. Many of those are incidental. They're not all there because they're sick from SARS coronavirus 2. About 50% are there incidentally. We see that there's 500 in intensive care, 400 for one high care, they're there in general ward, so 6,200 patients. And what interventions are they getting? Well, 243 are currently ventilated, and in a country of 60 million people, 741 are currently requiring oxygen. But as we say, at least half of these, if not more, are requiring oxygen for reasons other than coronavirus. So this is remarkably encouraging from South Africa. A lot of natural immunity in South Africa, which of course we know is as beneficial as, natural immunity is excellent as we saw yesterday. I won't re-show you the graphs on those now because I want to go on to this bit here. So Omicron BA.2 variant. So the original one was B1. So that was the original one there, B11592. So this one's called BA.2. So the original one we're now calling BA.1. And this is now BA.2. Now the PANGO lineage is described as a cluster of sequences that are associated with an epidemiological event. So the epidemiological event here was the arrival of the Omicron variant. Now, I'm just going to show you this because this is where the Omicron variant turned up. Its history along here is not well known. It's never been definitely identified where it came from. It could well have been mice. It could well have evolved in mice, but we do know it came from this early first Wuhan-based lineage here. So it did not come from Delta, it did not come from Alpha, it did not come from Beta, it's on its own. And it arrived apparently to convert the world from being a pandemic to an endemic, which so far is seeming to be a very positive thing. It's traumatic on the way, but it's quite amazing the way it's just arrived and it's had so much less severe disease, as we've just seen from the South Africa data, combined with the immunity which had accumulated, of course. Now, this is phylogenetic assignment of named global outbreak lineages. So phylogenetic is looking at the evolutionary history, the genetic evolutionary history. Now, what we actually have with this pandemic is that's the original Omicron here. So imagine that's the original Omicron there, that derived from wherever, probably from mice. Now, some people have got confused by this because some people thought there was the original Omicron here and that evolved into BA1 and that evolved into BA2. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. This is why so many people have got confused about this. That is not what happened. There was co-evolution. Well, not actually, co-evolution's got a specific meaning. They evolved at the same time, sequentially. So here we have one cladal derivation from the original Omicron, and here we have another cladal derivation. They were evolving at the same time. We could call these sister clades, and the clade is the grouping. It's like I'm part of my grandfather's clade that came out to my father and my mother and me and siblings and things like that. But of course I'm also part of my great-grandfather's clade and my great-great-grandfather's clade as it spreads out in a family. It's exactly the same idea with viruses. So there we are. They are sister clades. It is not that BA.2 evolved from BA.1. This is what's caused lots of confusion. And when you read, I've just read about probably a dozen different articles about this, and you can just tell that the journalists writing about this don't understand that. They just haven't got it. But that is the situation. So it's nothing new. It is an Omicron derivative, but it's not that the BA.2 came from the BA.1. It didn't. It came from a progenitor Omicron, an earlier version. So the original version was an Omicron progenitor. And this Pangolin association that collects these genomes have got a very nice thing there. And of course, it's the pangolin, which is the much abused mammal in China, Vietnam, and other parts of Asia, unfortunately. So a nice tie up there. Just a very clever name, that very clever name. So Omicron includes PANGO lineages B11529, the original, and descendant PANGO lineages. BA1, BA11, which we don't hear much about, can't be a very common one, BA2, and there's another one called BA3. So is it surprising we've got an extra one of BA2 that so happens to be slightly outcompeting the other one? Not remotely. These viruses mutate all the time. This was completely anticipated. It was obviously going to happen and will continue to happen. So BA2 that people are concerned about now is a descent lineage from the original B11529, as is the BA1 that's been the predominant one so far. It's the BA1 that's taken over from Delta and now it looks like the BA.2 is taking over from the BA.1. So this is sometimes called Omicron Plus, and it's not at all surprising. I remember doing a video where we had a Delta Plus. Of course, this is going to happen because there's natural evolution. First identified in the Philippines, interestingly. Then it looked like India happened next, but now it's in quite a lot of countries. So it's Omicron sublineage BA.2. At least 10,000 cases reported in 40 countries, so this is spreading around the world. It appears more rapidly than the original BA.1. Potentially increased transmission over the Omicron clade BA.1. Looks like this is the case. It seems to be transmitting more quickly. If it's multiplying and transmitting more quickly, then more people will be exposed to it, and more people will have it, and it will gradually displace the BA.1. Would be the assumption, as we've seen so many times. UK Health Security Agency have classified a variant under investigation, not yet a variant of concern. Doubling time seems to be every 4 days, so it's pretty rapid transmitter. Early data showing it's 120% growth advantage over the original Omicron clade, so slightly more than twice as infectious. Now that doesn't concern me because, as we've said, we're all going to be exposed to Omicron, and this just makes it all the more certain we're all going to be exposed to Omicron, because this is a much more transmissible variant. It's essentially a guarantee that we're all going to be exposed to this. Just a case of when. And this makes it even more unstoppable. So it's not the same. So like when Delta was taken over by the Omicron was 500 times more transmissible. And the other reason it took over from Delta was that Omicron, when someone was infected with Omicron, they became immune, or essentially immune to Delta, so the Delta simply died out. So it's not this difference. It's 120% difference, not 500% difference. But that is enough of a growth advantage to mean it will become the predominant Omicron variant. Similar growth in Denmark, Norway, Sweden and India so far, with this sort of doubling time every 4 days. Now, it does not have the same S gene target failure on the PCR as Omicron BA.1. So the reason we're able to identify the Omicron BA.1 from the Delta was that only 2 genes came up on the PCR, that the S gene didn't come up. The target gene didn't come up. Now with the BA.2 it does come up. So if you're testing with a PCR, just on the PCR test, if you don't do a genomic analysis, it looks the same as Delta. But given that Omicron is now completely taken over from Delta, what we can now say, if there's an S gene deletion, then it's BA.1. If there's no S gene deletion, we can say it's BA.2. I suppose it could be Delta, but it's very unlikely. Delta's essentially gone now, and that includes the United States and the United Kingdom. So slight difference there because of the change in the spike protein. So BA.2 is S gene positive, BA.1 was S gene negative is the difference. BA.1 has got about 60 mutations from the original Wuhan strain. About 60 mutations, and there's about 20 mutations different, we think, on the BA.2, so probably about another 20 mutations, but probably not enough to worry about. So Megan Call, UK Health Security Agency epidemiologist, no evidence at all yet it can evade Omicron BA.1 immunity. So am I expecting people to become reinfected? No. Will be different to Omicron in any meaningful way, so it's basically a minor variation. Variants will continue to emerge, of course. Not all variants is a problem, and this is one of those. We believe only having a transmissibility advantage at this stage of the game with population immunity so high isn't a total showstopper. So because herd immunity now is so high, I don't believe there's not going to be another wave of BA.2. If you've been exposed to the original Omicron, I believe you will have a very high level of immunity to this one. And in fact, I'll maybe just explain why that is the case. So here we have a diagram that we're fairly familiar with. So that's the coronavirus there, and as we know, there's a spike protein, spike glycoprotein, nucleocapsid protein, the protein that surrounded the RNA in the middle. There's membrane protein. There's envelope protein. And they're the main ones. And of course, the body makes. When these come into the body, all of these protein components recognised by the immune system that says, just a minute, this isn't part of me, this isn't part of my body, therefore I'm going to make antibodies to them. So if you're infected with a virus, you'll make antibodies to all of those. You'll have what we call a polyclonal response, and in fact there's about 22 different proteins you'll make antibodies to. But not only that, each of these proteins will act as a sensitization of the memory B and the T cells. So if a cell is in future is infected with any of these proteins, then the cytotoxic T cells will still kill the virally infected cell. So even though there's a bit of a change, a bit of a change there and a bit of a change there, then there's probably less of a change there, less of a change here. So the virus is still very much recognised as being a SARS coronavirus 2 and will be eradicated by the immune system accordingly. So that makes me pretty hopeful because of the polyclonal response, both to antibody response and indeed to the B and T cell response. In fact, if I just show you this video, I think this is from N+1 on Wikipedia. Very good of them to make this publicly available. This is the highest resolution they've got, but if we go in, you can just see how amazing this is. So even though if you change bits of this, and bits of this and bits of this, then there's lots of other bits that are going to be the same because it is so complicated. In other words, these bits here that are recognised as foreign, they're recognised as antigens, what immunologists call epitopes. There'll still be lots of epitopes, lots of protein structures that remain completely unchanged, therefore will be well and truly recognised by the immune system, causing eradication of the virus. Now, this from Wikipedia, I'll put the link in. Quite amazing. This has been verified as being accurate by teams in Russia and teams in the United States. This molecular atomic scale diagram, quite incredible. It just shows the complexity. But the point I'm making, if there's a change to a bit, if there's say 20 mutations different from the original virus, from the original Omicron, which it looks like, about 20 mutations different, that's not going to make any difference at all to the vast majority of the epitopes that are stimulating the immune system. Only having transmissibility, as we've said, so good immunity, it shouldn't be a problem. Little difference in vaccine effectiveness between the BA.1 and BA.2 shouldn't make too much of a difference. Disease severity, as far as I know, is comparable. It's not causing more severe disease. Unlikely to be another BA.2 Omicron wave. Basically, I don't think there's going to be. Denmark, it's now 65% of cases, so it is taking over in Denmark. Now, is it that Denmark's been particularly unfortunate all the way through this pandemic because it always seems to lead the way in new variants and mutations? No, it's just because they've got the best genomic analysis per capita in the world by far. So if it's 65% in Denmark, it's probably 65% in other places as well. It's just that they haven't caught up yet. Early data not been associated with an increase in hospitalisations from Denmark, so again, encouraging. Norway, there's quite a big increase in Oslo. More like the Norwegians concur that it's more likely to be more contagious than BA.1. Can those infected with BA.1 get reinfected with BA.2? The answer to that, I believe, is no. Okay, there might be 1 in 10,000, but basically, or 1 in 200,000, but basically not. And if you want reminded of the reasons for that, it's that level of complexity. There's so many different antigenic epitope sequences that there will be a very polyclonal response to the immune system. And 20 mutations isn't going to greatly change that picture. French Health Minister Oliver Véran. What we know for now is that BA.2 more or less corresponds to the characteristics we know of Omicron. So the French believe it's basically the same. Robert Gary, virologist, variants have come, variants have gone. Absolutely. They come and they go. I don't think there's any reason to think this one is a whole lot worse than the current version of Omicron. No. James Musser, various human infectious diseases researcher, Houston Methodist. The good news is we only have 3 cases in the United States now. These have all been discovered at Houston Methodist, which of course has a more advanced genomic sequencing capacity than other places in the States. So the fact that they've been discovered at the places where the genomic sequencing is best doesn't surprise me. So yes, there's 3 cases in the United States. Does that mean there's more? Well, of course there's more. It's just that they've been discovered so far at the better centres, because the genomic sequencing in the States overall is actually abysmal per capita for the size of the population. The United States agencies have not got their act together on this. UK is pretty good. Denmark is excellent. South Africa's good. Houston Methodist seems to be quite good, but other parts of the States, not as good. So not surprising it's been discovered there first. We're certainly not see the 5% of cases, 5% or more of cases reported in the UK. But there's only about 420 cases officially diagnosed in the UK, but that data is well out of date. So when we get the technical update this week, it will be higher. Certainly not the 40% in Denmark. This is out of date. We now know it's 65% in Denmark. We know that Omicron can clearly we know that Omicron can clearly evade pre-existing immunity. Of course, the Omicron does that. That's why people become symptomatic from both vaccine exposure and other virus variants. So, in other words, if you've had vaccination or you've had alpha, beta, delta, original wild type, you can still get Omicron. We lose immunity from it, but protection against hospitalisation is preserved. As we've seen from the CDC data yesterday. What we don't know yet is whether son of Omicron does that better or worse than Omicron, but probably won't do. That's an open question, but I'm not worried about it. A virologist in Denmark, BA.2 has become dominant form of the virus in this nation, 6 million people, accounts for 65%. BA.1 is on the decline, so the BA.2 is out competing the BA.1. Interesting. We're not so concerned since so far we see no major differences in age distribution, vaccination status, breakthrough infections and risk of hospitalisations. So all very much so far so good. Also, despite the high infection rate of BA.2, the numbers in ICU are still decreasing, as indeed they are in the UK. And finally, Francis Barlow, Professor, London University College, London. BA.2 about 20 mutations apart, as was said, so not that massively different. The two Omicron sublineages are sister clades that split from another several months ago and are not derived from each other. That's what's caused a lot of people confusion. Some people have been saying, well, this is a brand new variant. It's not descended from BA.1. Well, no, it's not a brand new variant. It's actually just descended, just a few months ago, they had a common ancestor. So it's actually pretty recent, and that means they are still really quite similar. That's what's caused a lot of confusion. People infected with one of the lineages would have robust immunity against the other one. So if you've been infected with Omicron recently, do not expect to be reinfected with BA.2 because you will have robust immunity. Robust immunity. At this stage, BA.1 and BA.2 can be considered as two epidemiologically largely equivalent sublineages of Omicron. So there you go. Amazing picture that. I think that's all scientifically accurate. Quite incredible. Quite incredible. And that's just a virus, you know. That's the simplest thing that we know of. You know, our cells are millions of times more complicated than that. And there's 70 trillion cells make up our body. Really quite amazing thing life is. Okay, so there we are. I'm not worried about it. So South Africa shows that the Omicron wave should be shorter lived in the UK and the United States, in Canada, in other places, as we've already seen in Australia actually, than the previous waves. And the new Omicron variant is nothing to worry about unless anything changes dramatically, and of course if it does we'll come and correct what I've just said immediately. Okay, thank you for watching.